Welcome, Anicka. It's great to have you here today. Anicka is here to talk about editing two publications, Western Living and Vancouver Magazine, which are two of Western Canada's most successful publications.
VanMag, Western Living, we both live in the same house under Canada-Wide Media, but they've had various owners over the years. Right now, we've been with Canada-Wide since 2018. VanMag is over 50 years old, so it launched in 1967. It's a city magazine, so it celebrates the best of living in Vancouver. I know we're going to be talking about content pillars, but I'll briefly highlight the content pillars at VanMag, and that is namely city. So we focus on issues in the city, short little newsy bits, as well as the people and places that make Vancouver what it is. We have a food and wine pillar that we focus on, where we're looking in particular at the restaurant industry, and certainly our restaurant awards are a big part of the local restaurant culture and an important sort of part of restaurant life for restaurateurs. And then we also have a culture section, which is focused in around arts and culture, some of the people that are creating in this city. And then there's also little one-offs that we have in terms of humor, and then we look at this larger section of feature, which would be long-form journalism, where you're highlighting and researching big stories in the city, as well as something called service journalism. So service is most simply described as helping somebody navigate something. So in Vancouver and Vancouver Magazine, that generally shows up as things like the Restaurant Awards. So helping people understand where the best places to eat in this city. It might also be, we do a wine issue where we focus on the best Okanagan wines and how to tour the wine country, and here are 5 bottles you should have on hand. So really helping somebody navigate a subject area, and that's something that VanMag does really focus on from issue to issue. And then Western Living Magazine was created in 1971, although it actually comes out of a even much older publication from the 50s called Western Homes and Living. And so it was an editor from Western Homes and Living that, when it closed, created Western Living back in 71. It is a lifestyle publication with a big focus on homes and design. And we often talk about Western Living as in helping readers to live their best life in Western Canada. And the pillars that we have there are homes and design. That's about 50% of the magazine, where we're really focusing on beautifully designed homes, focusing on some of the designers in Western Canada, as well as beautiful pieces that you can buy in Western Canada, shopping, that sort of thing. Food and wine is another big pillar. So we're, again, focusing on, there it tends to often be under the roof type stuff. So great recipes, local chefs figuring out how to, cook really beautiful food at home, with a little bit of restaurant work in there too. And then travel is the other one. We've also been focusing a lot on local travel. So particularly this summer, it was a lot of celebrating the best of BC and the best of Alberta for Albertans, and figuring out how to navigate locally, just living your best life.
That's great. I find that it's really interesting thinking about those content pillars. Obviously, over the years, you've probably changed those pillars based on audience interest. So taking Western Living for an example, I'm interested how those content pillars developed.
I would say we look at Western Living as celebrating Western Canada. So what, and Western Canadians in particular, and helping, like we said, living people live their best life. So part of that is having a really beautiful home environment, celebrating the people that are making really wonderful things in Western Canada, so makers and designers. But with that then comes people wanting to explore beyond that. And certainly when you talk to designers, where a lot of their inspiration comes from is travel too. So we look at sort of international trends, and part of that is going to those places and seeing what does the design scene look like in Amsterdam or in Kenya. And often when we're traveling and visiting these places, we're touching on these other pillars too. Right. So we'll be exploring food in Paris, or design, as I said, in Amsterdam or New York or some of the big areas, that sort of thing. So we try to look at those pillars as slices that influence each other too. So we will, for example, highlight restaurant design in food. So there's a little bit of fluidity between those, but it always comes back to who our reader is. And we know a fair bit about who our reader is through Vividata. It was PMB for many years, Print Measurement Bureau, then it became Vividata. And those organizations really research who your reader is, and you get a sense of, we know that they really like a nice bottle of wine, and we know that they renovate their homes every 5 years, and all those sorts of things filter into the way that we build what we think our readers will like. And then, of course, over time, the websites feed that back too. While I think the audience on the website tends to be a little bit different for both brands, it usually gears a little bit younger, and just because something does really well on the website doesn't mean that's everything you want in your print too. Like, you try to find that balance. But again, you get some good real-time information, and social media too. On social, you really see what takes off and what people are really excited about, and that gives you another little indication of your readership. So yeah, so as you're building those, you have this ideal reader in mind. I often think, like, one of our editors has become that. It used to be his parents, and now it's him. You look at the things that he appreciates and loves, and you have that vision in your head when you're creating content for those people, and what it is that you think that really builds that kind of home environment that is a magazine. By home environment, the magazine itself, not like home environment like Western Living.
That totally makes sense. You could take an area like travel and apply your niche to that topic area. Then that just helps round out all of your content pillars to build on the interests of your audiences.
I would say with Western Living, my primary objective with the magazine is actually primarily to support Western Canadian designers in particular. And so where we have less flexibility, where we might send somebody to cover a design scene anywhere in the world, when it comes to the homes and stuff, we're always focused on Western Canadian design. And I feel like that is our main job, is to celebrate the work that's happening locally, even when it's influenced by all of these things that are all over the world. So you keep coming back to that, like, where is our purpose? What is it that we want people to be excited about? And that is at the core of it.
It's interesting. You touch on something that we will be talking about as the students start to build out their projects, which is a values-based conversation, which we were using as part of the strategizing around developing the vision and mission of publications. And it's interesting that you're talking about one of the big values of Western Living, which is to support local Western Canadian artists and designers. And that seems to be a core value. Are there other core values of Western Living?
That's a good question. I think on Western Living side, because we're a lifestyle publication and because we have that kind of supporting the community as one of our core values, I think that what feeds off of that too is we tend not to be into a big takedown. Like, I'm not going to run a terrible review of this new restaurant in Western Living, because I don't think it fits with what we're trying to do as a publication. We just wouldn't write about them. Or if somebody designed a really terrible house, then I just wouldn't cover them. So it's by omission that they're not in there, as opposed to the sort of gleeful joy you can get out of really like saying, wow, that was a piece of garbage. Whereas we might do that on VanMag, like, you might be more like, there's just a different kind of tone, and it would have to be justified and, again, like, evidence-based and all of that sort of stuff. You don't do something like that for the sake of it. It's meant to be supportive and elevating, and that sort of filters its way into the content too. The way that we talk about something is different than we might talk about it.
The difference in tone between Western Living and VanMag.
VanMag, yeah, where we try to be a little more irreverent in VanMag, and in Western Living, we're not trying to be Architectural Digest in the sense of, or even Azure Magazine, which is a Canadian architecture and design magazine. We're also trying to be in the know, but willing to be playful and have a couple of little jokey lines in there and make people feel like it's something they can understand very readily. So it's conversational. It's not jargony. I guess that's part of it too. Whereas Art Digest, Azure, they're speaking to architects and designers that are their main audience. So they can be, and they should be, jargony. They're speaking to an audience that understands them. And that's the point. They don't need to be as accessible because everybody's right there with them. Yeah.
And so you're speaking to an audience who enjoys design, but isn't necessarily in the field of design.
That's right, yes. And designers are in there too, but I would say in general, they're less likely to actually read the articles. I've learned.
Only looking for names.
Yeah, they want to see who's in there. They want to see the work they're doing, but it really is mostly about looking at the photos and critiquing it themselves as opposed to knowing they don't need to read the stories behind it as much.
In your editorial description, you've really talked a lot about the competitive landscape, which really helps to define what your unique selling proposition is, as opposed to Architectural Digest or Dwell. So are design magazines your main competitors?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like there are competitors on two levels. There are editorial competitors. I always want the homes to come to us first. And in most cases, they do. Then there's also the advertising competitors. We are supported through advertising dollars. And you look at where are people putting their money and and actually, to be honest, over time, most of those local competitors have shuttered. It becomes sorry.
That's okay. I think it's awesome, and I'm sure the students will as well.
Just having a little complaint session, just registering. She's been unhappy that we've spent most of the day in this room. So then it just becomes where are people putting their advertising dollars, and is it on Facebook, and where are ways that we can help be in those spaces for them too? So are they needing an e-newsletter, news blast, and who are our readers, that sort of thing. It's become less clear over time who our major competitors are, but you certainly want to make sure that your voice is unique enough and that people understand that by being in that magazine, they're reaching your specific audience and nobody else is really reaching that audience.
We've talked about competitors in the sense that you have other magazines competing for advertising dollars, for eyeballs, for subscribers. And then also, too, you talked a little bit about competition for content as well, which trying to get the houses that you need. I suppose that also means writers and photographers. You have to compete for them as well.
That's true. And I feel like we have, for the photographers in particular, we have very good relationships with, because we compensate them better than a lot of the American publications do. So they give us heads up when they're like, oh, I just shot this house, it's beautiful. What do you think? And so we stay in the loop with them. With writers, we don't worry about if someone's writing for other publications, because I just want people to make a living. So I feel like they can write whoever they want and they just fit us in as they can. Excellent. But some publications don't like that. They want you to commit to them.
You talked about the content pillars and you've mentioned a couple channels as well. So just using Western Living, you have the magazine, you have a website, and a newsletter. Any other editorial channels that you have?
We have a newsletter that goes out 3 times a week. And then our social media really has become, for most people, a channel too, in the sense that that's where you're engaging in conversation, particularly on Instagram. The content that we create for Instagram, while it does come from print and digital, it lives in its own space there. You need to treat that in a certain way as well. So events are a big part of how we reached readers and designers, and also the revenue source. Things like design talks and stuff like that, a way to get sponsorship dollars and also just to connect with designers and provide education opportunities for them.
Since our teams are going to be starting with websites, and that's going to be their minimum viable product. I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about how you approach your online content versus your offline content.
It's continuing to shift over time as well,
Mm.
and I think it'll probably shift again this year, just in terms of priority. It has been a big priority for a number of years. We write daily content for the magazine. With Western Living, we have 8 issues a year. With Van Mag, we have 6. And so there just inevitably, there already is way more content than you can possibly fit in those publications. And we also want to be present in people's minds all the time. So it's part of it is timing. So sometimes I'll get a really great, let's say for Western Living, I might get a really great cabin sent to me right now. I don't have a winter issue really coming up until next November. And then even then, that's a Christmas issue. So that means January. So we're looking like a year from now.
Mm.
And sometimes it's so great that the person is like, I'm fine to wait a year and we can put it in the magazine. Or sometimes it's great and they're also very happy to have online exposure. So we'll write a story and get it on the website sooner than later. And we might actually still run it in the magazine down the road. We've started to do a lot more of that, where it might be digital first and then end up in the magazine, where it had always been the other way around. We also just like to make sure we're having things that are more immediate go on the website too. So it might be that there's a designer who is running some new show with their products that it's going to happen the next couple of weeks. So that obviously gets on the website right now, as opposed to waiting for a print magazine to come out. It might be that it's just a short little jokey piece, and so that makes sense as like something conversational and short to end up online.
Mm.
In a lot of ways, the content is similar, but it just tends to be quicker and also sometimes just more visual too. We'll show a really great space that we've been inspired by today that we throw up there. And yeah, some of the content categories are pretty much the same. I have the website open, so if you want, I can flip over to it quickly.
Sure,
if you want
that
to
would
see
be
some
great.
of the channels. It is. So you can see banner at the top, all of our social feeds, and these are the categories that I mentioned to you. But as you go into them, actually each of these buckets often has a subdivide. So where you might, if you were just interested in bathrooms under homes and design, you can click through to there. And also the most recent ones drop open. But again, you have the food and wine, travel, and then shopping starts to subdivide. Designers of the Year is a big awards program that we have. So that ends up having its own category on the website because it's something that people come to Western Living for. They want to figure out how to enter.
Oh, okay.
But if we scroll down, then again, you've got that sort of, there's, in general, people aren't really visiting websites this way anymore, where they go to westernliving.ca and then see what's new on your website. They're coming to us because we've sent out an e-newsletter, or we've done a social media thing, or they've just Googled whatever Angular architecture and somehow they end up on these various sites. But for those rare people that actually come and decide to jump on our homepage, they can scroll down and actually see what all of the latest content in these various categories. So some of these things like shopping, these were written by staff before the holidays. 5 iconic pieces of Canadian clothing you can gift this year, holiday reads, because editors sharing their holiday wish picks. So again, it tends to be a little more listy, shorter in and out. Doesn't mean you can't do longer stuff online. It just, for this sort of stuff, it seems to be that's what's
Right.
doing well for us.
Excellent. And so are your newsletters all, I guess I've noticed most newsletters you can subscribe to one of the content buckets or pillars. Is that how you do your 3 newsletters a week, or?
Yeah, we're actually looking into whether or not we would shift that. So right now, no, it's just you get the Western Living newsletter 3 times a week and the Van Meg newsletter 3 times a week. And we just try to make sure we actually diversify the content within the newsletter. So we make sure there's always one design story, one food story, because those are the 2 most popular categories. And then there's usually just 3 stories in each newsletter. The third one might be something else. But we're just starting to look into maybe we should be doing, for those people that just want design content, let's do a design newsletter. For those people that just want recipes, let's do a recipes newsletter. That is something that we're looking at shifting in the new year.
We've talked a lot about the structure and channels, and I think those are the key things that our students will be thinking about as they start building out their plans. We will talk a little bit about the editorial process, just quickly talking about the acquisition process. It's significantly different from book publishing.
It's a combination of things. Sometimes it's a pitch from a writer and or a photographer, as I mentioned. A photographer might pitch a story to us for a home, if that's what the story was. If it was coming from a freelance writer, they would send us a pitch letter. So it would be a beautifully crafted letter because you have to engage. I saw somebody saying, hey, do you want a story about how ducks could be like free food in Vancouver? And I was like, not really. It needs to be a little better crafted than that. They might have had me if they had some really interesting lead about a duck hunt they did on a Thursday night or something like that. But it needs to be engaging and exciting and something that we were like, yeah, I want to read that when you're reading the pitch. And then we would talk to the writer about how long we want it to be, what we're going to pay them for it, what the deadline would be. Usually try to give them at least a month. And once the story comes in, then it goes through an editing process. It might go back to the writer at least once more. And then it goes through a process where we have until it's great, we love it. Then we put it into fact checking. It gets fact checked to make sure it's all accurate. It goes to a copy editor who's a freelancer, and that she makes sure that it adheres to all of our editorial guidelines, and it's in perfect shape. It comes back to us, and then we final it, and then it's ready to go into the production process. So it gets designed with the photos, et cetera, et cetera. The other way that it might happen is as an editorial team, we might say, okay, this story, like, you know what, I really want a story on X in the next issue. Is anyone on the team going to write it? If not, who are the writers that we've worked with that we think would do an excellent job? And so we might go back to somebody that we worked with even a couple of years ago and say, oh, they were so great, I'd love to get them back in. Saying, we're thinking this, does that fit with your timing? And they'll let us know if they're game to take it on. And then after that, it would go through the same process. So sometimes ideas come from us, sometimes they come from writers. Wow, I'm really getting like a blinding light here right now.
What is that?
That's the sun coming up. What
No.
is the sun? Let's see if I can quickly close this down.
Actually, it's interesting because we will be bootstrapping to launch. And so how much content comes from your staff versus how much from other places? And I suppose some of that is dependent on where it goes as well.
Yeah, and I would also say it's somewhat dependent too.
Okay.
Right now, I would say it's actually probably around 60-40. So 60% from the staff, 40% freelancing out to various writers. Up and down. Certainly, there's lots of magazines where it's all done by the team itself, and they, make a go of it that way.
Anicka, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure and a real delight having you. Thank you.